All right, everybody, welcome to the Pro Church Marketing Podcast. I am Jono Long, and thank you for watching or listening. And I'm excited about today. I've got Tiffany Kelly with the Honest Pixel today, and so she's got some good stuff to share with you, and you're going to get a lot out of this. And so it's going to be good. How are you, Miss Tiffany?
I'm great. How are you, Jono?
I'm doing well. Doing well. And let's see, Tiffany is in Orlando. Are you like in Orlando? Or you're just like close to Orlando?
Yeah, close to Orlando, like a suburb.
Okay. All right.
Winter
All right.
Garden, if anybody knows what that is.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of Winter Garden a lot. I don't know. There's like a big church there or something. There's a big church everywhere, but maybe I know that. I knew a youth pastor that was at First Baptist Winter Garden or something like that. Anyway.
I know of that church.
Okay. So, and I'm here in Atlanta where it's hot and humid and nothing really exciting is going on. So anyway, well, look, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about what do we need to know about the Honest Pixel and what you all do.
Sure. Yeah, so I'm Tiffany Kelly. I have actually a background in graphic design, architecture, and ministry. So it's this very odd mix of things. Prior to starting the Honest Pixel, almost 3 years ago, I worked on a creative team on staff at a pretty large church here in Winter Garden. And prior to that, I have a degree in architecture. So what the Honest Pixel does, I really wanted to kind of bring in those experiences and figure out how I could help churches and small businesses. But one of the main things I do is spatial design for churches. So when I was on that church staff, a lot of the work that we would do as a team, not all of it, never kind of the primary thing that we would do, but we had a couple of projects where we were transitioning from one building to another or opening a new campus or opening a really big campus. And we would have to think through some of the design, sometimes with help from other professionals. And so I have a huge passion for that. And so that means everything from like your exterior signage and, maybe an exterior mural to your interior, like wayfinding signage, feature walls, kids check-in spaces, furniture, everything that really makes that first impression of your building.
Wow. That's awesome. And I as you're saying all that, I'm thinking about, and maybe you'd want to address this. I'm thinking about several churches I've been a part of, new building projects or new campuses, new wings of the building, new children's areas and things. It felt like we saved up money and spent so much money, and this part of things was never really figured in. And so by the time it got to the point where, okay, the carpet's down, the walls are up, now it's time to let's make it look like a children's ministry space or youth ministry space or whatever it was. There was no money left. And so it was like just left to volunteers. And then it's like, not that, volunteers are awesome, but not everybody does this for a living. It's like, you just invested all this money. And so I guess really the answer to that is, and probably what you would say is, plan this into the building process. This has just got to be budgeted for and part of it. Or is there, what do you say to those churches?
Yeah. I mean, I think off the top of my head, probably what is going on in a lot of churches where you walk in, and what I would describe, what I've seen is that it kind of feels sterile. Like, the finishes are there, the layout is there, and it feels new, but there's not much by way of like color and vision casting and, engaging spaces, exciting things to look at. And I think maybe what's going on in some of those projects, is budget. But also you sort of have to, if you're doing new construction, you have to have an architect, and that architect almost always has to have some interior design person or skills. You have to have a flooring finish. It just, whether you choose a cheap one or an ugly one, that's up to you. But that has to be there. But does the wall have to go anywhere past just a blank wall? Not really. You can open your building with carpet and a blank wall. But I like to think of the walls and the space around, that potentially could have signage on it as like a blank canvas. Like these are all areas to help guide people and share something about your DNA. Preach the gospel. You might have gospel messaging there. You might have something that's radically welcoming or hospitable going on in those spaces. So it's just a way to take, the bones and the framework of your building up a notch. But at the same time, it's really hard, I think, once you're in that building for your church staff to reimagine and to come in with that. What does it feel like the first time someone walks in? It's hard to go back to that place and imagine what it might look like if you're in there every day as a church staff member.
We're just glad to have it done, and the kids have somewhere. Y'all go. Just don't tear anything up.
Right. We've moved in. There's no holes in the wall. Done. Check.
Yeah. I get it.
Yeah. I was on a church staff. Sunday's coming. That's, rightfully so. The priority is what's happening with the core ministry. But some of these other things just help set the stage, help paint the vision for people, help welcome people in. Yeah. So I think those are secondarily important, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, absolutely. Off topic, but this is a question. I need somebody with your expertise to help me settle an argument. It started with redoing the colors of our brand because we had way too many colors. And we did this logo and the colors really before we had settled into our groove, who we really were. So we're making some changes. We've even had some just fundamental changes in our agency and stuff. So we're not redoing our logo, but we did redo the colors. Now, our logo is made up of a lot of individual sharp squares. Now, the website look and feel that I want, all of the sections and blocks are rounded, nice rounded corners, and they kind of float here and there. And that's the look and feel that I really, really want. But there are some, and I know I'm skewing you, okay. But the argument is, since our logo has really sharp corners on all the squares, that the photos and elements on our website should have sharp corners.
Yeah.
So what say you?
Yeah. Well, I think there can be an argument made for any option, but I think that
I'm right. Good. Glad you're
you're right. Whatever your opinion is, you're right. I think that the rounded corners on digital does have a modern feel, the buttons, the Apple interfaces. So to square off your corners, I do think takes away a little bit of that modern look. What you could do is do everything in circles, your photos, or not that would be appropriate for everything, but do either sharp corner or circle and have anything that was in a rounded box that could be transitioned to a circle.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, I don't know. I think I would lean towards doing the sharp corner everywhere.
Yeah, that's
rounding off the corners of your logo.
Well, that was a thought too, and I'm not completely opposed to that. I hadn't crossed my mind, but at this point, I would almost rather round off the corners of the logo than not round off the corners of the website. However, I did find several websites this weekend that had square logos and rounded corner websites. And again, I was biased, but the website, I shared it with people. I really only think a designer would pick up on it because they're squared logos at the top, and then you're done. It's not like the logo is sprinkled throughout the website, so it didn't feel like there was this big mismatch, but I
Yeah.
get it. I knew design people would say that it should match. So I figured, but
Yeah.
we'll see. We'll see. But I'm with
I
you.
don't know
It's
if I
like,
settled anything, but that's
well,
my opinion.
we'll see. No, I appreciate it.
Of
So
course.
jumping in a little bit more to what you do, and want to give some practical advice to anybody who's listening, church leaders or children's ministers or somebody in a building project. With FaithWorks, we're all about our mission is to help churches really just be known and be seen. We want people to find churches because people are looking online for churches. There's millions of searches every month for churches near me and variations of that. And so we're doing everything we can with Google ads and Facebook ads and social media posts and search engine optimization to make it easy for people to find a good Jesus loving church in their area. And we've got strategies to get them to plan a first time visit. And so we're all about getting them to that first time visit. But I also know that that's not the end. I mean, that's just the very beginning. And so what you do really kind of picks up where we leave off. Now, the church needs to be doing some follow up. The church needs to be building relationships, but your part is a major. What you do is a huge part of the first impression, and I think no one would argue that a lot of people make up their mind really quick whether or not they're ever coming back to this church. And so, with that in mind, tell us just kind of a little bit more about what you do, what's important, and how churches should be thinking about this. Maybe why it matters. Why should they spend money and time on the space?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think I'll go to something that I've heard you talk about before, and I think is so true. So that when people are searching for a church, whether they've visited once or a few times, they're not making those decisions based on just one thing. We're researchers. We're living in a digital age. People are going to check your website, your Google presence, your online
Mm-hmm.
presence. They're going to have the actual experience of coming into your building and experiencing a service. They're going to talk to their friends. And yeah, I think I read somewhere recently that people make a decision on whether they're going to come back for a second visit to a church in about 7 to 10 minutes. So
Yeah.
that's kind of sobering for church leaders. That might be before your worship band starts, from the time they park their car, how long that takes, who knows? But that's definitely in a lot of churches before the sermon is preached.
Mm-hmm.
And, I would never say that like the design elements, the visual elements of a church's communication or experience or presence are primary at all. They're
Yeah.
definitely secondary to the gospel, to the community, and all those things need to be happening. But I think designing your space in a way that is just realistic to say that if we want people to stick, that first impression has to be engaging, has to be community building.
Mm-hmm.
We have to have hospitality in mind. And there's a lot of things spatially, a lot of tips that I'll give for creating spaces that do that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's you're exactly right. I was reading, and it depends on which study you read, and lots of people have done studies on this, but everybody pretty much agrees that somewhere from like only about 6 to 10% of first time guests come back a second or third time. But the percentage of second and third time guests who stick, the percentage goes way up. It's anywhere from 30 to 50%, again, depending on who you're reading. And so there is so much to be said for doing everything you possibly can do to get someone to come back a second time and a third time. And I think this is a huge part of it. I know, we at the beginning of this summer, my family, we started just visiting some churches, and I'd been on staff at churches for 21 years, and I had never like gone into a church as like a newcomer, like checking things out, and I realized that I forgot what it was like to walk into a church for the first time, and I realized how out of touch I was with normal people, and I realized I never had to deal with parking because I was always there way earlier, and just little things like, because I was frustrated by the parking. There was a couple churches where I was like, oh, this is terrible. There's nowhere for me to park. We're not going here. I'm at that age. I'm in my mid 40s now, and I have patience for nothing. And so, but you've got people who, you've got a lady who she's been trying to get her husband to come to church for 6 months now, and he's finally going to give it a try, and he's looking for a reason not to like this place and not to come back. And I think that what you do can have a huge impact on that guy, on a guy like me trying to figure out, where I'm gonna go. I mean, and where I'm gonna land. Are my kids gonna like it? Is my kid gonna, if I'm dropping my kid off in this sterile nursery environment, they're gonna scream their head off versus somewhere that's like fun and bright and cool. I mean, they may still scream their head off, but let's do everything we can to stop the head screaming. So what are some of those things that you would say, like, hey, this is a big deal?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you hit on it, that a lot of times coming to a church for the first time, it's an experience of anxiety for most people. I mean, I was on a church staff for 11 years. Come from a church staff background, and it's an anxious experience for us. How much more so for somebody who's been away from church for a couple of years, or who's bringing someone who's not comfortable with church. So I think that anything we can do to take that wall between someone who's never attended and is plugged into your church and bring it down a bit. And so everything from, one of the primary things, and the first thing I'll touch on, is wayfinding signage. And this starts in your parking lot. Is it clear? I mean, people will put up with parking that's far away if it's clear to them which spots are for which people, and that there's a welcome person out there with clear signage that you're in the right place and here's where you go. And, just the fact that the church has been intentional and thoughtful, it's a valuing thing. Like, okay, they know their parking sucks, but we've been thoughtful and we're trying to make that experience better. Please feel encouraged that this isn't ideal. So signage on your way from the building into the building is really important.
Yes.
Another thing that,
go ahead. Well, I was just going to say, again, this is a little fresh on our mind because we visited some churches. And then I think back a couple of years ago when I was just getting started into trying to get my first few church clients, I was going around the churches delivering cookies. And there were so many churches, large churches, and they tended to be ones that started in a small building, and then they added a building here, then they added an admin building, then they added a gym, then a youth room. So there was like 19 different buildings that just kind of got plopped everywhere. And to find the church office where I was trying to go deliver cookies, get my foot in the door to meet somebody, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, every one of these churches needs me who's bumbling around like an idiot to like be a secret shopper and tell them that the signage is horrible, if there is any signage. And then another thing I noticed, I used to make fun of parking teams at churches. I used to think like, I mean, okay, look, we park at the grocery store, we park at the mall, we know how to park, we don't need parking teams. But then if you ever go to a church, and I've visited a few recently, where there's just not a lot of parking, there's like multiple services. And so you've got one service coming out while one's going in, and there's limited parking. And the parking team are basically just wavers. And they just wave. And I really need them to tell me where there's an open parking spot.
Right.
So yeah, the parking lot is a space that needs some thoughtfulness, and I think that's a huge step that a lot of churches could take. So anyway, basically that was a long way of saying amen, sister.
Good. Yeah. Well, yeah. And then once you get into the building, so to go back to a point you made, the secret shopper, I think, is a great idea. I think that a lot of churches should utilize somebody who's never been there to just come in and give a first impression, because I tell people a lot that once you step in the doors of the building, within seconds, and this is not that hard to do, but within seconds, is it super obvious where your offices are, where your kids check in, where your sanctuary, and where your restrooms, men and women. If it's confusing whether this is just a women's restroom and the men's is over there, then that should be abundantly clear in signage. Yeah. And really signage, among all the things, when you think about, flooring materials and furniture and giant wall decals. Signage is not that, especially if you're just talking wayfinding. We're not talking about big monument signs out on
Mhm.
your curb. It's not super expensive. It just takes an intentional eye, which really tells guests, we're expecting you. To have no signage tells somebody, we didn't expect any
We
guests
had
to show
no
up
clue
today.
anybody new might come. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like if somebody invited you over for a dinner party and you get there and they're in their like bathrobe and didn't start dinner yet. How devaluing would that feel? Like, did you forget
Yeah,
or did you just
exactly.
not care?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that to show people that it's abundantly clear that we expect guests and that experience is laid out for you with your wayfinding signage primarily.
Hmm.
Um, is a way to tell them that we value you and that
Yeah.
we value the anxiety that you're overcoming by being someone who was outside of this church and now is trying to plug into this church. That transition is something that we want to hold dear, that we want to craft, that we want to take care of, because people go through a lot to bring their families and to try new churches. So
Yeah.
that's one thing I would suggest.
For sure. Nice. So that we've made it through the parking lot. We're in there now. What do we need to be thinking about inside?
Yeah. Inside, I mean, the lobby, I think, really should be your primary focus. Um, and the first thing that you can kind of ask yourself is, how does it feel? A lot
Mhm.
of times, because it has to be thought about, we think about the square footage of the spaces and how they function, but how does it feel? And so if a church, the things that can contribute to the way, our moods and senses are affected by the space are things like, natural light contributes to that, wood and these biophilic elements, so wood and plants or even faux greenery, they boost the mood of somebody in a space. And then on top of that, things that encourage community. So if you walk through your lobby and it sort of feels like a road rather than a few living rooms. Not that I think
Mhm.
stylistically we should be shooting always for a living room feel, but I think it speaks volumes when there's no seating and when that seating isn't comfortable and encouraging community. So if there's spaces even for a couple of benches so that a mom with a
Yeah.
toddler can sit down and put on some shoes or something. So providing people with areas where they can stop and stay a while. I do think that speaks to people, and I think that also goes back to we're not the our the purpose for spatial design, I don't think, is just for first impression. I think
Mhm.
it's also for arming the people who are part of your church with spaces for community, spaces for connection, exciting things on the wall so that they're more energized to invite friends, so that they're more excited about welcoming in kids to the space. All of these things play into not just the first time guest experience, but the building community
Yeah.
experience.
That's a good point. Because several churches are coming to mind that I've been in, that I've visited. And yeah, it is like you said, it was just a big road. And I remember, if I see somebody I know, I remember stopping to talk to them. I feel like, well, dang, I'm holding this whole place up. I'm like, I am in the way. Like, we're gonna get run over. We got to get out of the way. And
Yeah.
you just had to cut off the conversation, or you know they had to go pick up their kids. You couldn't, like, it wasn't like you could walk out of the parking lot together or something and chat. So yeah, it's like, yeah, build in some of that if we want our people to get to know each other. Not, buildings have restrictions, and you might have to get
Right.
creative, but yeah, I mean, even just a bench, just a little bench would go a long way. So
Yeah. Yeah. And for churches where restrictions on square footage in your lobby and just layout in your lobby are there, even like outdoor spaces, so patio furniture and some shading, even in Florida, that works. It's
yeah,
awful, but it works. People do stop and stay if there's
yeah,
patio furniture, and a tree, honestly, for kids to climb on is the big popular thing for my kids right now.
yeah,
So we stop and stay because there's something to do outside.
yeah. Oh, that's great. That's great. You made a point in, you've got this church spatial design playbook, which everybody should go to thehonestpixel.com and download. or read through that because it's really good. There's really good stuff in there. Probably my favorite one is number 3, and it's you said create spaces that photograph well. And I love to talk about photography. To I love. I'm a terrible photographer. I'm not a photographer. I don't get it. I so badly wish I did, but I don't. But I do love good pictures. And one of the first things we do with our clients is send them a Sunday morning shot guide so we can coach them on taking good photographs that we can use on the website and social media, because a lot of churches aren't thinking that way. A lot of churches' social media is full of events made from Canva templates, and there's no real photos of their people. And that's one of the hardest things for us to get, just photographs of people. And so I was excited to see that you said, yeah, design some spaces that photograph well. So why did you say that? Why is that important? What are you saying there?
Yeah, it's interesting that you point that one out, because that was like my most nervous point. I have 8 plays in that playbook, and that one I felt like I had to give some caveats, because I do think that it's a temptation in churches to just look pretty on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just always kind of package what I do with, the goal was to be authentic. So if you're authentically welcoming and engaging and full of life, then your building should show that. And if you're not, then, maybe work on those things. But that's kind of the goal with that point of making sure that your space photographs well, is that, if community is happening inside your building, if people are bringing their friends, taking photos with their friends, having special events, getting baptized, visitors and people will be there and taking photos together. And so just recognizing that your building is going to be the backdrop. They're not going to be taking a photo of your wall and then putting it on Instagram, most likely. But
Right.
it'll be a backdrop. And is that backdrop exciting? Does it feel like it's consistent with who you are as a community? And then those things are just become tools for evangelism. Like if all the photos I'm posting of me with my friends at church, the photos seem exciting and people seem like they're happy to be there and there's interesting things in the background. Not that somebody's going to visit your church because there's an interesting wall, but it all contributes to this like overall sense that we get about a church, that there's life here, that there's exciting things happening. So that's why I said that piece.
Well, I'm glad you did. That's great. That's huge, because those things getting posted on social media, whether it be by people in the church or whether it be by the church themselves, our philosophy when we're managing social media for our churches, we want to show people what it's like to walk in here. We want to show people what it feels like to go here. So, and that's what we always tell everybody. Don't climb up in the rafters and get this awesome shot of, the sanctuary looking down. Like, no one is ever going to have that viewpoint. Get a shot of what it feels like to sit on the back row because that's where guests are probably going to sit. Get a shot of what it's going to feel like to drop kids off. So, I love that. And just make it attractive.
Yeah. And another thing I would say to that point is, don't just get photos of your stage, what's happening on your stage. That can be really tempting because that's what's happening. That's the gathering. But like those lobby photos, those exterior patio photos, those are really important too. So I think those go a long way in not just sharing what's going on in your church from like a consumer standpoint. Here's what we have for you. Come and partake. But like from a life of the church, what is the life? What is the getting involved and being part of this community look like and feel like?
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. Very cool. So all of the, like, if you had to condense it into like, just like, why do you care so much about this? Why should churches care about their space? And we've hit on it here and there, but to put a bow on that and kind of package that into a philosophy or a couple of sentences. Why should churches put money into this, put time into this, care about it, think through it, all of that?
Yeah, that's a great question because these types of things do cost money, and a lot of things in the church are vying for that position of taking money out of the budget, and I get that. I think the primary reason is, that everything that your church is doing, it communicates to people. It has a way of speaking to what you value, and so if your space is sharing some of those values, is helping people imagine what it's like to get more connected into this community, if your space is welcoming people in, if your space is like clear to navigate and even exciting for kids, that speaks to people that you value them, and that you were expecting them. And
Mhm.
then on top of that, yeah, it's just a way to be radically hospitable. I think that a lot of churches, in so many different ways, think about hospitality, but maybe sometimes end it with like the guest experience as far as relationship. And I do think that's super important, maybe even primary. But if our spaces are also providing and kind of setting the stage for that hospitality with, cozy furniture and
Mhm.
a layout that's really clear, then that just helps those relational moments be even more impactful. So that's why I would say that it's important.
Yeah, no, totally agree. Totally agree. The, so a few more random questions as we land the plane, and along those lines, what it does take money, but it is worth it. It is important. We work with a lot of smaller and larger churches, just kind of across the spectrum. Obviously, a larger church with a larger budget can do more, but it, is this viable even for a smaller church that's got a small building project? They scraped everything they could together just to build this one new children's room, and I think the tendency would be, well, we've got some ladies in the church, we got some people in the church, they're good, their house looks nicely decorated. Let's just turn them loose on it, and which is fine. Everybody's intention is good there, but a small church that's got a tight budget, is this viable
Yeah.
for them? How does it work for
Yeah.
them?
I mean, I think first of all, I think you can get more mileage out of your existing space if you're just thinking through how it communicates to people, how people are moving through it, how to use it in a way that feels fresh and brings life to the experience. So, yeah, for a lot of churches, they will make the budget decision to not build new, but just to refresh their existing space. And everything that I do, bringing in like the graphic design elements and bringing in kind of influences from your brand identity, does really do that. I think that you can elevate an existing space on a tighter budget. But on top of that, if you really have very little budget, I would say go and check out my spatial design playbook, because that is kind of there, meant to be a resource for churches to start thinking about what they can do on their own. It's meant to be kind of a toolkit. Like, what can we do?
Yeah.
What can we bring in um, to just make small improvements that would go a long way? And then another thing that I do is I just started providing this service called a spatial design audit, where
Mhm.
it's kind of like a secret shopper sort of thing. But I'm not coming in on Sunday. I'm just, visiting either remotely through a video that you take of your space, or if the church is local,
Mhm.
and just giving you a sense for like the first impression opportunities. And then at the end of that, I give a really small package of not a ton of design work poured into it, but just a lot of sketches over photos of your space and a lot of points about the opportunities I see. So for example, like one church that I did some work for recently, they had just like a lot of blank walls in their lobby. And this one corner had this ceiling section that was rounded and like kind of set down. It looked like a coffee bar should be there. And the
Mhm.
ceiling and the lighting above, the way that the walls and structure of the space, it looked like this was a hub for something. This is where I should go to get something, a connect kiosk, a
Yeah.
kids check in. But then there was no furniture there, so it just
Yeah.
looked very awkward, and they didn't see that. And so I'm like, this space is screaming for a coffee bar to be here. And then they were like, oh, we actually do serve our coffee here. We set up plastic folding tables and squared, and it just looked bad.
Mhm.
So we worked on what it would take to do a semicircular coffee bar that really made sense in that space. So some of those things that I could point out might not be things that a church would have the budget for right away, but a lot of churches too, they'll spend a little money on the front end to get a
Mhm.
designer to think through conceptually what can be done.
Mhm.
And then, that gives them something exciting to present to their church to fundraise.
Yeah.
So for most of the projects that I work on, I'll do a step one where it's just conceptual. We're just creating renderings that are really exciting to take to your church that paint the vision for them of what the space can be.
Yeah.
And then, the development of the design is after that. And for a lot of churches, the fundraising campaign or the buy-in that they're able to create with the vision casting from the pastor is so much more impactful with those strong visuals from the beginning. So I think there's a lot of ways to stretch a tight budget.
Gotcha. Um, so shifting gears a smidge here, what and might be throwing you a curveball, but is there like one project that you've done, or maybe something you didn't do that you've seen that you just thought was like the coolest space that in a church that you've ever seen,
The coolest space.
or like
I've
just
seen
your
quite
maybe
a
just your
few.
favorite?
Yeah. I mean, if people are listening and they want to go and look for inspiration, Passion City Church in Atlanta, I think in
Mhm.
Atlanta, right?
Mhm. Yep.
Um, they do a lot of really engaging, interactive things within their lobby. And I've noticed have had nothing to do with their space, but I've attended a couple of creative conferences that they've
Mhm.
put on where their teams are unpacking a little bit of what goes on when they're preparing for an event or changing over their lobby for some seasonal thing that's going on, and they're just really creative, and are refreshing the space pretty frequently. So that's a good one to just follow and look out for and get inspiration from because they do a lot of cool things.
Yeah, I've been to a couple of events there, and yeah, there's several sections where they've just done some amazing looking art. Obviously somebody came in and did it because it was hand painted or it was chalk drawn or whatever, and it's like as soon as the event's over, it's like on to the next thing, and it's like, oh my gosh, that was so amazing! I just got rid of it. But yeah,
Yeah.
they do some very cool stuff. If somebody wants the audit, if somebody wants to hire you to do the audit, how do they do that?
Yeah, they would just email me. There's a little information on my website if they want to see a little bit more of what is included, but they would email me at thehonestpixel@gmail.com. And
All
that's how
right,
you start a project with me as well.
cool. So last question: if a church is like, hey, yeah, look, we can't do anything. I would love to. I don't have any money. We can't hire anybody, but I know we need something. If we could just do one little thing, like what is something that a church, small or large, could do soon without spending a fortune? What's something they could do that would get them a lot of mileage, get them a lot of bang for their buck, and really make a difference?
Yeah, I think that if your wayfinding is not super clear already, some churches that's already very
Mhm.
thought through, and so they're good on that. But I would say that wayfinding signage would be the primary thing. If people walk through your front doors and don't know where to go from there, I just think that there's so much value in making sure that
Hmm.
that experience for a first time guest is clear. But if your wayfinding signage is already set and everything is really clear through your building, but there's not much more than that, I would say that the first thing to do is just pick one wall to create a feature wall and just think about like what is the one thing that we would want if we had 3 words to share with our community, people who are Christians or non-Christians are here for a graduation. What would those 3 words be, or the key statement
Mhm.
that could fit for everybody? Because remember, your lobby is not always going to be speaking to the person who's a member. And then bring in some color and maybe take some influence from the shapes of your logo and design one wall that you can either paint or do a wall decal, like an applied, basically like a giant sticker on your
Yeah.
wall. And, there's some expense there, but especially if you have a little bit of design skill on your staff, most staff members could design one feature wall and then get that applied for a lot less than they would expect. And it would go a really long way in just painting the vision of what this community is like.
Yeah. So not a bulletin board.
Not a bulletin board.
Not a bulletin.
I wouldn't do that. No.
Feature wall. Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah.
Feature.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. Please, for the love, stay away from bulletin boards.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Well, if they want to find you, email you, thehonestpixel@gmail.com. Go to thehonestpixel.com. Follow you they can find you on what, Instagram, Facebook.
Yeah. I have most of the platforms. Instagram is where I'm the most active. And
Yep.
I always tell people, like, if this content seems, exciting to you, but maybe you're not ready for a building project yet, just go follow at the Honest Pixel on Instagram. And that way that kind of bookmarks this type of tips and content and case studies from projects I'm working on. And so it'll start getting you thinking about what might be possible when you are ready for that building project.
Cool. Well, Tiffany, thank you so much for
Thanks,
giving us
Jono.
some time. And thank you, everybody who's listening or watching. And if there's anything we can do to help you, reach out. You can find me at Jono Long on social media. And like we already said, go follow The Honest Pixel. And we'll talk to you next week.